Thank you for inviting me. I won't say thank you to Reverend Jason Leininger, and he understands why. We have a different kind of relationship. I'll be good and try to stick to my script I wrote up. I am a fairly recent resident of Springfield, arriving here with my husband Richard in 1998. We had lived the prior 5 years from 1993 on the island of Tobago. I was born on Trinidad in 1942 during World War II, but some distance from it. I still managed to feel some of the pain of war, as I was stung by a bee as a toddler when we went to buy sugar in the ration shed. The British were governing the colony at that time, but we had been ruled by the Portuguese, the French, and the Spanish before then. My grandmother, as did many of the older generations, spoke patois, a mixture of European languages, Carib, and Arawak. There was also a large segment of the population speaking Hindi and other languages of India. Their ancestors having arrived as indentured servants to work in the sugarcane fields, which the African slaves had left. There were also families from the Middle Eastern countries, such as Lebanon and Syria. Until the age of 14, I lived in this mix of cultures on this island of 1,800 square miles. That's about between the size of Rhode Island or Delaware. My family left for England in 1956, as did many others from the British West Indies. The island nations were pushing for independence from the various colonizers. We experienced a new way of life on an Italian ship, the SS Napoli, with hundreds of people from many of the islands during the 3 to 6 week journey across the Atlantic, then into the Mediterranean, landing in Italy and riding across Europe by train and crossing the English Channel by ferry to London. The different temperature was not the only shock to my system. On riding the double-decker red bus to school in England, I saw that an elderly English woman would rather be put off the bus than sit next to me as I sat in my school uniform. I was the only black person at Beckenham Grammar School for Girls in Kent, the 4 years I attended there. The social environment was as cold as the temperature. I learned greeting persistence to warm the air and myself while honoring my upbringing. Training to be a registered nurse took me 50 miles north of London to a hospital nursing school. Among the students were others from the West Indies. That 7 years in England with my family was good preparation for living in America. I traveled to St. Louis, Missouri alone and was met at the airport by the family of my husband, whom I had met and married in the 2nd year of my nurse's training. He was coming from Forbes Air Force Base in Topeka, Kansas, to introduce me to his family. Arriving at night, riding on the multi-lane, brightly lit Highway 70 felt unreal. I was grateful that I had prayed for God's company on the plains and reassured myself that the same God watching over my family in Trinidad and Tobago and England was even now with me in America. The bright lights vanished quickly as we left the highway to go into Kinloch, the home of my new family's elders. I was suddenly back in Trinidad as we went up some wooden steps in the darkness through a small sweet shop into a large, dimly lit room. My escorts pushed me to enter the room first, where several elderly men and women sat around the wall on benches, stools, small chairs, and at the head of the circle, a high-backed, straight chair held a woman who, even seated, was impressively tall. This was beyond Trinidad. It was instinctively African. I moved to my left, extended my right hand, and greeted the first person, saying good night, as I would in Trinidad. I moved around the circle, not waiting for a response from each, until I reached the lady I came to know as Big Mama. This was Aquila Harris, the oldest living member of the family. She held on to my hand and announced happily, "She talking English." Oh, that's a Trinidad accent, I'm sorry. This apparent acceptance of my presence was a relief to me that I would not be finding my way back to the airport alone. This was December 1963. That night, I slept at the home of a family member who was very active in the civil rights movement. The next morning, we went to a local bank where I was handed a sign to carry as I joined the circle of walkers. That was short-lived, as the sign was soon grabbed out of my hands, and I was pulled into the police car of a family member who shouted to his sister that she was crazy to involve me and that she would have to explain to her nephew why I was deported before he arrived. You do know what was going on, don't you? I was picketing a bank in America. Topeka, Kansas was another learning experience. I was soon hired as a graduate nurse at the local hospital. My husband was fearful of any interactions I may have in public. I was afraid to stay home, hearing the news stories that made me aware that people living in the homes around us had guns, something I had never before experienced. Cutlasses, yes. Guns, no. The home in which we lived had bullet holes in the glass door. Working in a hospital, especially on the pediatric ward, I met people I could be at ease around while learning about the new place. I again was the first and only Black person in my position, although we did have nursing assistants who were also Black. Riding the bus to work, I met Black registered nurses who worked at the VA hospital. Seeing my ID, they told me they did not know that Stormontvale Hospital would hire Black RNs. I made lots of errors on my days off as I tried to find a home in a safer neighborhood. I met many people who were surprised at my skin color after having spoken to me on the phone. Some were apologetic and expressed fear that the neighbors would be upset if they let us live in their house. My accent often led to challenges, the biggest one concerning my career. When I arrived to keep an appointment with the secretary of the Kansas State Board of Nursing, she refused to take me into her office after seeing the color of my skin. As always, God provided a way. I sat the State Board of Nursing examinations and passed high enough to be licensed in several states, including Missouri. I watched soap operas to practice an American accent. When I walked our first baby in his pram, many neighbors asked whose baby was I walking. I had to get an expensive babysitter for my son after I discovered that the base nursery separated Black and minority babies from Caucasians, keeping our babies in a small, windowless room. My first real friend in America, Doris Bell, refused to sponsor me for citizenship, since she felt that no Black person should willingly choose to become a citizen of the United States. I had read Ebony magazine in Trinidad and Tobago and England. Doris became my living source of information on real Black life in America. We then moved to live on Forbes Air Force Base. Living on the Air Force Base provided more diversity, except in my search for a hairdresser. I lived similar experiences in Omaha, Nebraska, Alamogordo, New Mexico, Edwards, California. We were then transferred back to England, but living on an American Air Force base at Lakenheath. I worked at the base hospital, lived on base. My sons went to the American school on base, and we visited often with my family in London. My sons were learning to straddle cultures when I separated from my husband and moved back to America with them. We came to St. Louis in 1975, since that is where my son's godmother, Doris, lived. I was now a single mother living in a new community in St. Louis County. I was hired at the VA hospital in the city, and my sons attended school near our subdivision. 3 weeks after arriving, a truck came into the back of a government car in which I was riding, returning to St. Louis on I-44. I was truly terrified for the first time. How would I care for my sons? Their godmother's presence was reassuring. Work was sporadic between therapies and surgeries for a spinal injury. The blessing in this scary time was meeting a single father of a son and daughter. Richard Lewis introduced me to his family and Springfield. We married, combining our families and living in the city of Blackjack. Life here was much like on an Air Force base with neighbors from other U.S. states, as well as other countries. We enjoyed 18 years as a family in one community, visiting Springfield enough to get to know family there. Recovering from my first spinal surgery, we visited Trinidad and Tobago. It was Richard's first time outside of the U.S. and on a Caribbean island. I was blessed by his calm in this developing country. When we returned home and I heard him telling his friends that every American should spend some time in a country ruled by non-Europeans, I understood that he had also been blessed by the experience. He had also caught the travel bug. I wanted to finish my work toward a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, which I had started while on Lakenheath Air Force Base in England. I went to classes in the evening at St. Louis University, worked the night shift at the VA hospital, and slept in the day. Richard introduced me to a man of a unique culture. He got the kids off to school, went to work, cooked dinner for us all, and we all cleaned the house on Saturday. The dream of every woman, a real partner. We were all happy when I finished that degree. Despite the limitations caused by my back injury, I now felt secure that I could contribute to the family income for a while longer. Richard was ready to travel again. He went alone to England to meet my family and returned with a sister and brother who were coming for a visit. I hope he will tell you about his introduction to real English culture. My family reported that this lone African-American male worried them by heading out on rail, bus, and underground trains to visit places in England that they had not yet seen. When he returned, he stated a new preference for life in the USA. We occasionally paid short visits to Trinidad and Tobago between the surgeries on my low back. Soon we were empty nesters, and Richard was determined to live on Tobago, his paradise. Maybe he'll tell you about that experience. He won't. I'll say we were resident there 5 years. There is an old saying in TNT. Listen carefully. To see me and to live with me is two different things. Did you get it? That's how it is with life on an island. Richard wanted to live anywhere but TNT or Springfield after that. What I saw in Springfield was family and security. He saw memories that created anger and frustration. We both won the prize of living in Springfield, near family, and with all conveniences readily at hand. As soon as we found a home, it was time for a spinal fusion. When that was healed, we started a new experience of leisure travel. We cruised the Panama Canal, visited places in South and Central America, Hawaii, cruised the inner passage of Alaska with its icebergs, and flew to the North Pole, riding a train back from the lodge at Denali to fly home. In Africa, we visited Guinea, Ghana, Zambia, and South Africa. We also visited England again and Scotland. Most recently, the family flew to Mexico to spend Christmas with our relatives who live there. What a joy to see so many places. What a privilege to live on a cruise ship, meeting people from all over the world. Between trips, we acquainted ourselves with life in Springfield. Richard recognized the many changes and growth in his small town home place. I was soon identified as his wife. He enjoyed being with old friends and family, participating in Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Black History Month activities, and Kwanzaa. I noted the presence of a small core group of blacks, whites, and Hispanics in attendance at these events. I brought my greeting habits with me to Springfield. Not everyone responds enthusiastically, but I have never been rebuffed here. I have worshipped on cruise ships, been part of a church family everywhere I have lived. I'm still finding that wherever I am, I see similarities and differences in every individual I meet. My most recent learning experience was that of praying with visitors to the Schweitzer Food Pantry. One of the many people who stays in my memory is the lady who got as much flour and baking ingredients as she could. The driver told us that she baked for everyone in the neighborhood, providing them goods for free, using her talent to serve her neighbors. One young man did not think I would want to pray with him because he had a Confederate flag symbol on his phone. We became friends. I read bumper stickers in the newspapers. I'm into genealogy and history. I know what our ancestors experienced throughout the world. I know what my husband experienced in Springfield. I am aware that our students still have experiences that create anger and frustration. People still belittle and denigrate others who are not exactly like them. We find reasons to be superior, even in our Bibles. We all have something to give, some way to reach out to relate to others positively. At minimum, I offer prayer and a smile. Thank you for listening. I hear movement.
Wow. Hello. I'm on your left.
Hi, KJ.
Hey. Does anybody else just need to take a minute and breathe? I'm not kidding. I think I could listen to you talk for hours.
That's why you bring me over here regularly.
That was so enjoyable. What a life. Thank you for telling your story and for opening us up to a perspective that we don't often get to hear. I guess now is the time for questions.
I wish you would come up here, Richard. I bet somebody has a question for you.
I've got a chair ready
But
for you.
he won't.
It's got real scary up here.
Just keep talking.
Being honest.
There you go.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. We have been at Schweitzer for about 16 or 17 months, and my son, Hudson, one of the first Sundays we were here, he spotted you from across the room. And he said, I'm going to go talk to that magnificent looking woman.
How old is he?
Well, at the time, he was 9. He's 11 now.
God, he's young.
Yeah. Anyway, he always seeks you out in the room. So you are adored.
I love him.
And I have one that thinks you're a magnificent woman as well. And he's 82.
He's your husband. He is your husband.
Could you share the story of how you came to sing in a choir here at Schweitzer?
She led the choir at the time. I go to the Y on Republic Road, and in the locker room, well, actually, I sing everywhere. I used to sing at work. I sing everywhere. Even sing Happy Birthday when it's not my birthday. But one of the members, someone who was in the Gales choir, the Senior Saints choir at the time, she would always harass me and tell me, you need to join the Senior Saints choir. I told her, no, I don't do choirs. I just sing for myself. Eventually, she talked me into it. And I came and I joined the choir. What she didn't tell me, the day that I arrived, and I said, well, where's Pat? Because they're asking me, what do you sing? I told them, I don't know. They mean, are you a soprano or whatever? I told them, I don't know. I just sing. Where's Pat? Oh, she quit. So I'm now in the Senior Saints choir as a soprano. I love it, by the way.
Lynette, we have conversations often, and so can you speak to what it is like living in Springfield as a woman of color, but not being African American?
Oh, that part's interesting. Because people assume that you are. I tend to dress like this. This is a recent thing, not having my head wrapped, and I'm just adjusting to it. I always feel undressed, and, so I'm adjusting to it because I do it because I believe when I was in the sanctuary or praying, my head should be covered. But I've learned that God does not really strike me dead if it's not covered. And I'm having trouble with my arms and stuff now. I have a lot of restrictions, and I think Richard's getting tired of following instructions of wrapping my head. So I'm going without. I still have my head wrap with me. It's tied to my handbag just in case I panic. But people would assume I'm black, so I must be American. And if they hear me speak, and I happen to be doing an accent that day, sometimes the accent is worse, and they say, where are you from? And I will tell them, this is not just in Springfield, though. This has happened to me everywhere. Then I'd often get Trinidad, Mississippi. Or is that in Africa? They just wouldn't know. It is wonderful now. At the time I came to Springfield, more people were traveling. And the other thing in Springfield, there are many, many missionaries here. So many people have been to Africa. Of course, they all assume I'm African too. But I haven't had real problems here. My biggest problem is with, dare I say, my husband's family doesn't understand I'm different. I'm different. And I will continue being different. I've been welcomed. I don't think I've ever been insulted here. The challenge with me is I don't always know when I've been insulted because I'm serious. I look at people, I like people, and I greet people wherever I am. I say hello, the why, anywhere else. I speak to them. Some of them don't answer. I don't consider that an insult. I really consider it their loss. But I've also met a lot of people who initiate conversations with me. So Springfield has been a better time of my life. I have not had to go look for a job here. I think that's why my husband is able to appreciate Springfield in a different way now. He's retired. He does not have to go look for a job here. Out of his stubbornness, he's occasionally went, when we first came, to get a job. Same job that was in the paper. And when they saw him, the job was no longer there because it was at a level that they really didn't want to hire people who looked like us. But I tell him, wonderful, look what they're missing. And look at you. You can walk out of there and not worry that you're not going to have an income to feed yourself. So I always look at it like it's their loss, because I'm wonderful.
Amen.
What are you laughing at?
It is a breath of fresh air to hear someone as confident as you.
That's the secret.
Because I think in a lot of ways, so I'm from South Korea, but I was adopted and raised by white parents in Dallas, Texas. And long story short, I'm the most Texan of my family, which is bonkers crazy. And I'm like you. If I don't think I would recognize an insult if it hit me in the face, because I have to go and listen to other people of color talk about their own life experiences to realize what it means to be a person of color. And I don't think of myself as Asian. I sometimes do. I sometimes get really excited for South Korea. Like if I see a South
when
Korean
they're winning
actor.
in something.
Sure. Like representation, I'm starting to understand that. But it's crazy, like, and the reason I love listening to you and why I'm so grateful for you talking here is that exposes me to another story, another point of view that I would otherwise not be able to hear. Not just like an African American story, not even necessarily a black story, but just that you are who you are, Lynette Lewis, and have such a beautiful history, and that from your travels to the places that you've lived, it's been a real joy. And hearing that coupled with Richard's story on video has just been really fantastic. It's a place that I still feel new to here at Springfield, though I've been here for 4 years. So.
Children. When it came to my children, I worried about them, especially the boys. I was fierce. I prepared them. I don't think any white parent anywhere in the world prepares their children to step out the door as fiercely as black parents do. I always used to say I don't want to have to go to jail because somebody messed with you. So you're not going to do anything to let anybody mess with you, because that's the only thing I'd have to go to jail for. I don't care what you do to me. Don't mess with my babies. And we made it through. They haven't been to jail. I haven't been to jail. Thank you.